So first, let me just introduce myself. I'm originally from Australia, and I live in Singapore now. And I've been here for 2 years with my family, and we've just had our employment passes extended, and our intention is to raise our children here in Singapore. My background first comes from medicine and science, and I was a research scientist. I then became a consultant dietitian and have worked for nearly 20 years in private practice. But then in the last 5 years or so, 8 years, I've become very interested in this applied science of longevity and the whole concept of being able to live healthier and longer. And a nice way to show this is to look at how do we live and how do we age. And for many people, we can live a life up until our 50s, early 50s, where we're fortunate, we are bulletproof, and we tend not to succumb to some of the health conditions that ultimately will impact our quality of life and how long we will live. But when we start to hit our 50s, blood sugar levels are rising, or you have higher blood pressure, and you're starting to take medications, etc. What I'd like to talk about today, and the focus of all the things that I like to do as part of my life and career, is to say, is it possible, and to what extent can we extend the healthy period of our life, what's called our health span? We may not be able to live longer, but we might be able to extend the years of which we are healthy and to contract the periods of not so good health. Now, we can do this with very simple tools, which I'll talk about. But what we can also do, which is, let's say, the Holy Grail, is would it be possible to not only extend our health span, but in doing so, does this allow us to perhaps even increase our lifespan? And this is a wonderful thing to think about. And we can get lessons from the people who live the longest. There are the centenarians on our planet, and we can get hints as to how do these people live to 100 years or more. What we do know is, of course, they are blessed with perhaps genes and genetics for longevity, but we also know a little bit about how they live. And can we take some of the lessons from their lifestyle and apply it ourselves? One thing that we really know about the centenarians is they're very good at dodging bullets. They don't get the health conditions that will ultimately affect their lives until much later in life. So how is it that they manage to live into their 80s, for example, without the heart disease and without the diabetes? And how they might be doing it might be explained in how they choose to live. When they do eventually succumb, they're just like everybody else. The diseases take their toll at the same rate. So the message that we get from the centenarians are, how do we dodge the bullets? One thing that we really would not want to have is this nightmare scenario where medicine and science allows us to live longer, but we live longer unhealthily. To have 30 years or 40 years of ill health, it's not what we'd like to achieve. So health span and lifespan, we want quality. So what are the tools? What levers do we have to impact on our own health in a good manner? And I like to show this slide because so many of them we have control over. And the first three, how we choose to eat, how we sleep, how we exercise, are in fact some of the most major tools. And if we wanted to think about it like from a medication perspective, these are the most potent drugs you could ever take to improve your health. Angie has just spoken about our headspace and engagement. Of course, how you feel in this world plays an incredible role, and to be lonely or isolated is going to have an incredible impact on long-term health. But then there are other things that we have some control over. Our hormones, they have a large impact on how well we will age and how our bodies will change. We all have, as Angie had spoken about, our deck of cards to play with. And we all have our own unique set of genes that we have inherited. And this is something that we cannot change. But what we can change is this new area of science called epigenetics, which is how the genes that we have get switched on and switched off. And we have some level of control over that, again, with the type of lifestyle that we lead. And then we live in 2020. We have access to incredible medications. And then there's also this very unregulated world of supplementation. But medications and supplementation also is in our suite and in our toolkit, at our disposal, in order to manipulate our health. There's lots of ways that I could come today and talk about health and talk about longevity. And one lens to look at would be, because I'm talking about the body today, is to talk about our body composition. And as we get older, how do we want our bodies to look and feel and function? And that can be not just the amount of muscle and body weight that we have and body fat that we have, but also the health of our organs, the health of our hormone systems, the health of our immune systems. But let me focus on body composition, for example. And if we start at the head, our bodies, how we carry ourselves, how we look and how we feel plays quite an important role for many people on how they feel and how they present themselves to the world. Our aesthetics, our feelings of self-esteem quite often are attached with how we look and how we feel. But then there's also our ability to exercise. And I'll talk about it further later on, but our ability to exercise and the type of exercise that we do plays an incredible role in how long and how healthy we will live. But in order to do that, we need to have the muscle composition and the ligaments and the tendons and the flexibility and the proprioception to stand on this planet strong. And our body composition makes up that. How much muscle do you have? If you're younger and you're wanting to do high-level athletic performance, clearly your body composition plays an important role. But then we look at our health. And again, if you're carrying excess body fat, this has links to so many of our chronic health conditions: diabetes, heart disease, cancer risk. All of these things are linked with how much body fat that we carry. But on the converse side, it's the same if you have too little body fat. If you're a female and you are still in the pre-menopausal periods of your life, if you're carrying too little body fat, your ability to sustain a pregnancy can be impacted. And so it is not good to have too little. If you are older and you don't have some measure of body fat, you don't have the buffer for when you're feeling unwell. And then when we look at our muscle mass is hugely important as we get older. We want to stand on this planet in a strong way, and our amount of muscle that we have gives us that strength and gives us that rigidity. And if you are a male and if you get over 50 years old, we begin to pay the price of something called sarcopenia, which is the slow but steady wastage of our muscle. So it's like credit in the bank. Being able to maintain a certain amount of muscle mass and keeping it as we get older allows us to stay stronger for longer. And then we can look at it from a health perspective, diabetes, for example, and our ability to regulate our blood sugar levels. If we contain and carry muscle, the sugar in our bloods accessing and going into muscle is a one-way street. And so the more muscle that you carry, the better blood sugar control you can have. So how much you weigh and how much fat you carry and how much muscle bulk that we have are things that are important for our health and for our longevity. But it all starts with the mind. If we want to start to make changes to our physical body and our physical health, one thing is to set the tone to have the right type of expectations. Expecting to get quick results or expecting to do things that is beyond the scope of your genetics is something that we need to consider. So you must have realistic expectations. And also, it's important to look at, are you looking for short-term goals here or long-term goals here? Are you wanting to look a particular way for an event? Are you looking to build and create a shape and a type of health to see you through into your 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s? Are you the kind of person that needs to chip away at it slow and steady, or do you need to see some early wins to give you the motivation so that you can keep on going? Irrespective of what it is that you're trying to do, if you're looking to do things long term, the types of changes that you want to make with the lifestyle decisions that you have and the type of eating that you choose to take on board, they need to be permanent and they need to be sustainable in order for them to carry through for time. And then having said that, you need good psychological tools to be able to continue on this path. And this is where having the skills of resilience and the skills of mindfulness become incredibly important psychological tools in the toolkit to achieve what it is that you want to achieve with your body. So let's look at these levers. And I do want to talk about nutrition because, as I had said, nutrition, sleep, and exercise are incredibly important levers. So let's go within nutrition, you have smaller levers that you have control over. And if we think about food and what comes into our mouths, we can look at it from three different ways. First of all is timing and distribution. When should we eat and what time of the day we eat and how do we distribute that food through the day? Second to that is actually how much are we eating? How many calories are we consuming? Are we consuming more? Are we consuming less? We need to know about this. And then we want to know, what are we eating? And I'm going to talk about all of these components, but what are we eating? We need to know more about foods, the carbohydrates and proteins and fats and oil and alcohol if you consume it. These are the building blocks of the foods that we consume, and we need to know and understand them, because by manipulating them, we can manipulate our health. And if you're wanting to gain weight, lose weight, change body composition, improve heart health, improve blood sugar control, improve cognitive awareness, then we need to be able to manipulate these three levers of nutrition. So let's go into each one of those in a little bit more detail. So the timing and the distribution of how we choose to eat. We've got to remember, as human beings on this planet, like every animal source on this planet, is we actually live in a day and night cycle. We live by the sun and by the darkness. Our bodies have a circadian rhythm, and it is again largely genetically determined. We can be the Early birds who like to go to sleep early and wake early, genetically determined. You might be the night owl who, irrespective of your circumstances, you will always want to go to bed later and wake up later, and the people that live in between. We live on that rhythm, and it's good to know that rhythm, and how we choose to eat fits into that. Our body and our cells in our body have these things called clock genes. Our cells, our organs, our tissues, they know what time it is. So not only are we regulated by sun and light, our bodies also have these internal clocks. And because of that, we can sense the nutrients that we eat in the morning and in the middle of the day and at the end of the day. They will do different things. Consume the same nutrient early in the day, the body knows it's daytime and it knows to use that nutrient as a fuel source. Later on, it might say, let's save that nutrient and store it. So what you eat through the course of a day is really important. We also know that the type of food you eat can impact other parts of our life and our health. Anyone who has had a great, big, rich, heavy meal at night, you may well find that you don't sleep so well that night. And disrupted sleep has a real impact on our health. You have too many glasses of wine at night, you might close your eyes and be knocked out, but you're going to wake up feeling dehydrated in the morning, and the quality of your sleep was not good. So we know that you've got to think about what foods you're having and when you're having them, and what kind of impact that they have on your energy levels and sleep, etc. We also need to know when not to eat. So the concept of fasting has now become more mainstream, but it's not a new thought. Take a child who goes to bed at the times that children should be going to bed, relatively early, and they're asleep at 7:30 at night, for example, and they've had dinner an hour or 2 hours earlier, and then they have a lovely 10, 11-hour sleep like a child should have, and they wake up and they eat some breakfast. Well, lo and behold, they haven't eaten anything for 14 hours. We as adults would be priding ourselves and saying, well, I'm doing intermittent fasting. It was just natural. Look at children, they already fast. It's just that we as adults don't have the restrictions placed upon us by our parents to tell us to not be eating after a certain hour. And when we start to think about the timing of our food and giving ourselves some rules and limitations, all we're doing is just restricting the time at which we're eating. So it's not something uncommon. All of these things are important when it comes to how we choose to eat. As I said, how many calories are we consuming? If you are somebody that needs to lose weight, you need to be in a calorie deficit. If you are somebody who is underweight and is trying to gain weight, you need to be in a calorie excess. Both of these things are easy to say and not always easy to do. Weight loss is difficult. Weight gain can be difficult. Either way, it takes work and it takes effort, but you need to know a little about food. So a few things, and I'll talk about each one of those macronutrients in a moment, but if you look at the graph, just keep this in mind. Protein and carbohydrate as actual foods have the same number of calories weight for weight. Fat has nearly twice and some calories weight for weight. So high fat food has a high calorie density. And the one thing that I want to show here is that alcohol sits in between the two. So if you wanted to look at alcohol and think about it, I think the easiest way to think about alcohol is liquid fat. And that's going to give you a good visual picture of calories here. Also, if you want to understand food better, it's hard to take food and be able to look and say how many calories are in it. For the people who are interested in really breaking this down, an interesting place to start is to just track what you choose to eat using an app for a week. and take something like MyFitnessPal or Easy Diet Diary, and when anything that you eat, you put into the app, and then it will tell you how many calories you've just consumed, and you'll get some real insight as to the types of foods that you're eating and the numbers of calories you are consuming, and you can't unsee this, and it will help you understand. So do that, but also look, we're creatures of habit. If you're trying to bring weight down and you look at your food and you make a visual decision to eat less volume, it's going to be less calories. But we're so accustomed to doing things the same way and eating the same amount that just visually making some changes can have a real impact. So let's go into each one of these macronutrients into a little bit more detail. So first of all, let's look at carbohydrates as a food type. We get our carbohydrates from plant. So to list carbohydrates: bread, rice, pasta, potato, sweet potato, corn, quinoa, noodles of any type, fruit and dairy, biscuits, crackers, and then anything that is high in sugar. Sugar and carbohydrates are the same thing. So soft drinks and sugary drinks and added sugar and table sugar, they're all under the banner of carbohydrate. And so what do we know about carbohydrates? Well, one thing that we know is that the human body loves to use it as a fuel source. It's a very, very prominent, predominant fuel source of our body, and our brain needs a certain amount of carbohydrate as a fuel and sugar as a fuel, and our body has a demand for it. And carbohydrates and sugars all finally find their way into our bloodstream as glucose. And glucose is sugar, is our fuel. And as anybody would know, our blood sugar levels are very, very highly regulated. You could eat no food for days and you will have a blood sugar reading that is controlled. And when people start to have blood sugar readings that are dysregulated and slowly rising, these are the hallmarks of pre-diabetes. So again, and diabetes is one of the chronic health conditions that is going to affect our lives as we get older. And talking about dodging bullets, we have to think really carefully about carbohydrates and blood sugar control. A little more, we have always a storage of carbohydrate. Our liver and our muscles have it there ready for action, and we've got about 2 hours worth in storage all the time. And then we need to also get it from our diet, and our body can make carbohydrates, and we can convert just about anything in our body into carbohydrates. And all of us use carbohydrates differently at different rates. The things that we need to be careful about carbohydrates is they're not, there's a hedonistic aspect to it. Food marketeers know that human beings like the taste of sweet. What we know about carbohydrates is that we have a very poor off switch for them. When we have carbs, we want more carbs. Certain carbs hitting a particular sweet spot really can play on us, and we can desire and we can want. And anybody who is needing to regulate their body weight, particularly for losing weight, think about your carbohydrate intake, how much you are having, because there is a very, very good chance that that is the place to look. And there's lots and lots of interesting information with respect to carbohydrate and blood sugar control and Alzheimer's disease and diabetes. So there's an immense amount of health interrelated into carbohydrate. But we need to know about it and think about it. And my take-home message today is be wary. Carbohydrates, as I said, we don't have a good off switch for them. If we go to the next, to protein, okay? Protein we can get from plant, we can get from animal, And sources of protein is red meat and white meat and fish and seafood and eggs. And then we need to remember all of the plant protein foods. And I like to bundle what I'm about to say as being a protein food, plant-based. All the legumes, chickpeas, cannellini beans, 3-bean mix, lentils, tofu, tempeh. And now, because of how the world is turning, there are all of the plant proteins that are more synthesized, the Beyond Meats and the Impossible Meats and the Hura chickens and the, these now non-animal protein sources, all the textured vegetable proteins that we can buy. So we can get protein in from both plant and from animal, and our body needs protein. Protein plays a very important functional and structural role in the body. So all the muscles that we have are made up of amino acids, which are from protein. But then all of our processes, our body made up of DNA. Now the DNA makes proteins. So all the processes of our body rely on protein. And our body takes the amino acids from protein and recycles them and uses them again until they are worn out and passed out of our body. My message to everybody on protein today is that if carbohydrates, we have no off switch, protein-based foods we do have. Protein brings on satiety. So the feelings of fullness come from protein-based foods. When it comes to actual food, there's very few foods that are just protein. They come in a package. And so if you're eating plant protein or animal protein, there's other things coming, and generally, often, there's a lot of fats that come along for the ride. And so the different types of fats, saturated fats and omega-3s, omega-6s, omega-9s, all of which have different health properties, are going to be interbundled with the protein types of foods that you choose. And also to remember that it's in animal protein that we find saturated fat, and that's where we find cholesterol. And for some people, there's health implications with those. There is also saturated fat in some of the more tropical oils, palm oils, etc. And so our fats and our oils, they're now high calorie, very important food types. Again, as a human being, our body can utilize fat as a fuel source, and all of us have 100,000 calories, if not more, of fats on our body that can and will be used as a fuel source. Our fats have so many functions. They can provide insulation. They're involved with our hormones. They support and are involved with so many different processes in our body. And our fats and oils, as I said, play an incredible role in so many different areas of our health. Omega-3s fats, for example, that we get from fish and from walnuts and from flax seeds and from cold pressed flaxseed oil. Those omega-3s have a big role to play in the brain and make up much of the material that is in our brain. They play a very important anti-inflammatory role, and inflammation and chronic inflammation is very, very critical to our health and detrimental to our health. So omega-3s are incredibly important here. The omega-9s that we can get from avocados and from olives play a very important heart health to us. The saturated fat that is in a lot of animal product provides fuel, but not necessarily a huge amount of nutritional benefit. And omega-6s, which we get from plant sources, play a role in inflammation. And we need to get the balance between the omega-6s and the omega-3s to make sure that we're not living in a pro-inflammatory state. We can use fat as a fuel source. And our human body is almost like a car that can run on diesel as well as unleaded, except not having two different engines. It's all within one engine. And we can become fat adapted, and we can do many things with fat as a fuel source. And then there's alcohol. Alcohol is high in calories. The number of times that people tell me that it's clear, liquid, it couldn't possibly have any calories. Well, it does. It has 7 calories per gram. It's liquid fat. And we have to remember what alcohol does. It's a fuel source, but we can't store it. So we can store fat, and we can store protein, and we can store carbohydrates, but we can't store alcohol. So when you're consuming alcohol, all the other fuels that you are taking on board are now being put into storage. When you consume alcohol, it's a disinhibitor. So we have a tendency to eat more food when we are drinking alcohol. And of course, it has toxic effects. And I'm not saying that we should not be consuming alcohol, but we need to put it into consideration with the big picture when it comes to the calories that we're consuming and the amount of food that we consume. So thinking about nutrition and you realizing that it is a tool, and today is not a discussion about how to gain weight, how to lose weight, but I just wanted people to be thinking more about the timing that they choose to eat, what it is that they choose to eat, how much they choose to eat, becoming a little more savvy, thinking about the health conditions that they might have to be concerned about, and just listening to what I've said, the incredible amount of control you can have through the food that you eat to help delay the onset of heart disease and diabetes and hypertension and Alzheimer's disease and cancer. So many things we can be preventative of. But I also want to spend some of my time today talking about some of these other levers that are incredibly important. And I could not tell you whether nutrition or sleep should sit on top of the pile of the tools that we have. Sleep is critically important to our health. And so much happens during sleep. And what we now know is that sleep is not this process of just being unconscious. Sleep and the things that occur in sleep are incredible. And if I take something as simple as our immune function, for example, right now we're living in a world where there is no vaccine for COVID, and what is it that we've got in order to walk out the door and to cover ourselves? Talking on resilience, we actually want to have physical resilience and immune resilience because we don't have a vaccine. Now, if you are sleep deprived, your immune system is compromised. The more sleep that you have, there are so many things that happen at night with respect to immune function. Not only is sleep the time where our immune system goes to work and fights the things that comes on board. If you think about it, when you are unwell, you don't sleep well at night and the fever comes up. That's because your body is making that decision to put you into a fever state, to raise your temperature, to help kill the bacteria and the virus. Sleep is the time where healing is occurring. It's where our body is fighting the virus, but it's also the place where all our immune cells are doing very, very important things and building. And so deep sleep, we have these different stages of sleep, but deep sleep is where we have the physical repair of our muscle, for example. We need deep sleep. And when we deprive ourselves of sleep, we are depriving ourselves of health. And so what my take-home message for sleep is that all of us should have this aspiration towards achieving at least 7 hours of sleep per night with a minimal amount of sleep disruption, and that you have sleep strategies built into your health plans and health programs in order to try to get that at least 7 hours of sleep with minimal amount of interruptions. And if you are able to do this, then again, it is going to play an incredible role in your long-term health. It's going to play a role in your body weight and your appetite and your management of how you choose to eat. If you are tired, you're going to eat more. If you're tired, you're going to probably consume more carbohydrate foods, and you're going to probably need them for fuel because it's a very long day when you are tired. And as I said, when so many different healing things occur at night, it's very interesting that people who are trying to lose weight, for example, don't lose weight as well if they're sleep deprived. If you're sleep deprived, your blood sugar levels go up. And in fact, sleep deprivation gives us some blood sugar readings that look like that of a pre-diabetic. So I cannot stress enough how important it is. And in fact, we have the control. We are the only species on the planet who deprive ourselves of sleep for no apparent gain. We are the ones that have control. And as I said, the third pillar that I think are the most important is exercise. And as I was saying, that our body composition and the amount of muscle that we carry is very important, and that we want to preserve this bank of lean muscle for as long as we can. I used to swim a lot in Australia, and I remember being on the beach one morning, and I like to swim very early in the mornings. And I swam with a group of swimmers, and there was a woman in her swimmers standing in front of me with her back to me. And I remember her having this incredible V-shaped back and these strong shoulders and just this grey hair. And when she turned around, she was an old woman. She was 83 years old. And she would swim our 1 kilometer, 1.5 kilometer ocean swim every morning. She looked like a 20-year-old woman from behind. And seeing her front on, I remember being stunned. But it reminded me, and in fact, it inspired me to say, you don't need to slowly but surely give up with respect to physical health as you get older. She was a pillar to show me what I could possibly achieve. And I think all of us need to have the idea that we can always work a little bit harder on improving our fitness and our exercise. But it takes effort and it takes time, and we do need to push that little bit. And if we're thinking about longevity, what do we need to be doing? Is it heart rate based exercise? Is it blood flow that we're trying to do in heart and lungs? Well, the answer is yes. If you want good cognitive control and we want good blood flow to the brain. If you have good heart function and you're able to pump blood through the body well, cardiovascular fitness is so important. Heart disease is #1 killer, except Singapore cancer is first and heart disease is a close second. So we need to have heart rate based fitness, which we need to be challenging. But we also need to have a certain measure of strength. As I said, our ability to get up and get down from a chair as we get older makes the difference between whether you are independent or not. We need to be able to not be fragile. Fragility and weakness of body ultimately has a big impact on our long-term health. And I know this is a lot to ask. Think about how you choose to eat. Think about how you sleep. Not only do you think about exercise, but the type of exercise. But it's important. And as I said, these are the things that are going to give us our health span and our longevity. We're not buying our way out of this. So all of us can get and push towards being just that little bit more fit. Exercise is very dynamic. As we all get older, our hormones do change, and part of the process of aging is the slow and steady change and decline of our hormones. And let me just explain a little about how our hormones change as we get older. If you're a male, just again, this is a more general information for people. If you are male, and testosterone is one of our driving hormones, it peaks when you are in your early 20s, and it's a very, very long, slow decline through a lifetime. And in fact, we still can have quite reasonable levels of testosterone at an older age. And testosterone is partly responsible for how much muscle we carry, how much body fat we carry. But as you get older, testosterone levels drop, which means that as we get older, you're going to have to work harder to maintain lean muscle because you're losing the hormone that helps promote it. So it's really important to make sure that you have as a good amount of muscle and think about your muscle composition as credits in the bank. Growth hormone is very similar, again, higher in men than in women, except the difference with growth hormone is that it drops far more dramatically. And so with men from 40 to 50 and 50 to 60, things are dropping off very, very quickly. So our ability as men to preserve lean muscle really becomes compromised once we get over 50, which is why I spoke about sarcopenia earlier. Another hormone, cortisol, for example, as we get older, as we live in times of high stress, cortisol can have a very, very significant impact on our health. And living in a world of high stress and high cortisol has much impact on our long-term health and blood sugar control and ability to sleep, etc. The hormones that are predominant with women, estrogen and progesterone, again, a very, very complicated symphony of hormones. And with women particularly, as you reach that period of menopause and perimenopause, these hormones are really flipping and turning in many, many different ways and directions, and they can have a lot of impact on your health. How you sleep, how much body fat you put on, where you put your body fat on, these things play a role. And then finally, insulin. As I had said before, blood sugar control, consuming carbohydrates. When you consume carbohydrates, when you consume sugars, in response to eating those, our pancreas produces insulin, and dysregulated insulin has significant links with diabetes. So we are able, through exercise, through medications, through sleep, through lifestyle, to be able to manipulate our hormones in a certain extent. And by being able to do so, again, preserve function for longer. And it's worth thinking about. And we can measure all of these, of course. And then the world of medications and supplementations. If we look at nothing other than body composition, for example, there are so many different medications that people take and can take that can have an impact on your appetite, either increasing your appetite or decreasing your appetite, or making you desire certain foods. People who are taking anti-anxiety and depression medications quite often find that how they choose to eat can be impacted, and it's worth just knowing it. And there are so many different impacts of prescription medications, and if you are taking these medications and you're noticing that it's having impacts on your body weight or shape, these are things that you want to discuss and talk to your health professional about. But that unregulated world of supplementation, we need to be careful, because you don't need a prescription to be able to go and get access to a world of supplements. And we do need to remember that supplements are not, in many situations, having no impact. They can have significant impact on the medications that we take, on the health that we have, and these impacts could be good, they might not be. And I don't want to talk about them in detail today, but I want to highlight everybody to remember and think that the medications you take and the supplements that you take could ultimately have a positive or a negative impact on your health. Finally, is that we're in a position at the moment where we can find an awful lot about our internal health, and we can do this just through some key critical blood tests. And just to highlight some of the ones that I think that are important is that we can measure our blood sugar control easily. We have incredible access to knowledge about our heart and our heart health, which could be as it could be a matter of blood tests for cholesterol right through to imaging of the heart. We are able to look at our DNA now and find key genes that may or may not have an impact on our long-term health. What I'm trying to say here is that early detection is really important. We can track our bodies well. We can do something as simple as our waist measurements and seeing whether our waist is slowly but surely heading in the wrong direction. The belt buckle tells us an awful lot. We can track sleep. We can track the number of calories we consume through an app. We can track our amount of calories that we burn and how much we use our heart rate. And it can be taken to whatever extent that you need and want. But it's important to remember and to know, because if we want to live a longer, healthier life, one thing we want is to detect things early. And as I said, we want to be like the centenarians. We want to be able to dodge the bullets. And if you're able to take on board health conditions early, you might be able to reverse them. You might be able to be preventative of them, which is what I was talking about today. Or you might be able to manage them better. But either way, very important. And where do you start? So we start with small steps. You look at how you choose to eat, and you may make the decision to make just a few small changes. You can look at how you choose to eat and think of the timing. And by consuming too much at night, could I distribute my food somewhere else? What 2 or 3 things could I do to allow myself just a little bit better quality sleep? And again, there are so many tools that we have access to on this front. Making sure that our expectations are realistic and we have realistic goals. But it's small steps and it's small changes. And in fact, it's the little changes that you make over the course of a long period of time that ends up having a profound impact later on. So again, I'm so sorry that I had my internet fall out. I wanted to ensure that we had plenty of time for questions. And everybody, thank you very much for listening. And I look forward to being able to answer, no doubt, some interesting questions that will come. Thank you very much.